First experience in salvaging barns was when I was 19 and working on the West Coast in a small market garden. The manager of the farm asked me to dismantle a barn that he had built, he had on the property where he was farming, but it was down in the lower corner surrounded by redwoods, and it's because it was in the lowland, it was almost underwater for a portion of the year. The ground was really damp, and when we started dismantling it, it became evident that not only was it sound, but it was made from old heartwood of redwood and was incredible in its quality. And actually, there's no chance that you could even purchase such high quality lumber. So we quickly changed our mind and started salvaging this. And we could straighten up the structure by using cables and come-alongs and tied it all together, and then made it into a residence for some of the workers there. And I was just incredibly impressed at the longevity of this lumber that was basically buried directly in the ground, sitting in maybe what is water for over 60 years. And it was like it had been put in the ground the day before. I mean, it was incredibly high quality. So that was really my first experience and realization that some of these old structures are not just workable, but unique and irreplaceable. The barn that we're looking at here, I've been calling the Bates Hollow Barn because that's where it's going to be relocated in upstate New York. It's a beautiful example of excellent timber framing. All of the joinery has been housed or shouldered, which adds many times the strength to all of the joinery because it gives the full dimension of the lumber is then load bearing and supporting itself. With those simple half-inch deep shoulders, it also gives you an indication of how precise the timber framer was in carving this lumber out originally, because all of the increments are within a half an inch of one another, and that spans over 40 and 50 feet. So it really gives you some insight into the quality of craftsmanship that went into building this barn. So we have to catalog and label the entire barn. So we'll make a sketch of the barn, indicating, where every timber is, and then we'll label it on paper, and then we have to transfer that number and identification system to the barn frame. Done.
Yes, well, this was just drawn up by Andy, by a pencil and paper, and then these numbers will be transposed onto the CAD. So Mark will be able to manipulate the window layout.
So the A bent will have 4 posts, and the top plate, which is the primary connecting timber within the bent, that will be A5, and so on. And that pattern will exist throughout the barn frame. So when we look at the labels after the whole barn has been disassembled, we'll know exactly where that timber belongs in the frame.
They had to remove all the hay, probably some farm equipment.
You want to take the barn down as closely as the way it was constructed, the way it was put up as possible, as the inverse of that, because we'll start, of course, with the roof system, and we generally don't try to salvage all of the components of the roof system unless the sheathing was so sound that the barn was entirely dry. Another way you can determine the age of a barn is by looking at the way the rafters are connected. At the ridge beam is a more modern construct. The original timber framers didn't see the necessity for the ridge beam, and this barn has no ridge beam, and that gives you an idea that the original timber framers were putting this up, before 1890. It was here in the new country. We had incredible stands of beautiful hardwoods, oak, ash, maple, that exceeded anything that existed out in Europe. Here in North America, it was not uncommon for tie beams to be 40 feet or longer, hewn from a single timber without any kind of taper to it. That gives you an idea of what the virgin forest that our original farmers were dealing with. Well, barns do represent the great original American architecture. They spring from the ingenuity of our countrymen, and they built working representations of their integrity and strength. The barn, at the center of the homestead and farm, was so closely linked with the family's livelihood that many times it came before the house and often outlasted their residence.
That'd be better and more.
Do you mind using your long rope?
No.
And we'll just do that while we're there and it's up. That way when we get these off, we can take those at one at a time. Because the rest of them will stand there until we get...
It'd be nice not to roll that thing over my line.
Most of the timbers are hand hewn, and with some exception, the knee braces and secondary joinery has some milled components, and if you look closely at those timbers, you can see the circular blade opposed to the opposite direction circular blade, and it gives you a little bit of insight that this was probably milled on a water-driven sawmill. The primary purlin, that'll probably be the longest timber in the barn. It's a smaller dimension. It's a 6x6, hand hewn, and 50 feet long. It's pretty remarkable when you think that they are able to get this so straight and so linear, and again within a half an inch or less. The pegs, which are an essential part of holding the barn frame together, were made out of a different species of wood. This is a hardwood, an oak, because the shear strength of the oak is so much greater than that of the pine or the hemlock. It makes it a perfect choice for the original timber framer to use, and all the pegs in this barn are original. They weren't replaced. There was no need for them to be replaced.